No worries. Alrighty, so before we get started with the rest of our presentation, just wanted to inform everyone that we are providing closed captioning and interpretation. So if you want to access the closed captioning, you can view it below by clicking on closed caption at the bottom of your screen. And we also are providing interpretation in Spanish, and you can press the interpretation button that explain in Spanish. Now I will interpret that. Entonces tenemos subtítulos y interpretación en español y pueden acceder la interpretación en español haciendo clic en la inferior de la pantalla seleccionando Spanish, y también tenemos, pueden ver los subtítulos haciendo clic en Closed Caption en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Thank you everyone for taking this time. And next slide, please. We want to start off. We always want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are joining tonight's Zoom event from different places, likely in California, and wherever that is, we just want to acknowledge that we are on occupied and stolen land. I am joining you all from the city of Huntington Beach, which is also known as Tongva land, and we encourage you to identify those whose land you are on, and you can look it up if you don't already know in a link, nativeland.ca, that will be posted in the chat. And not only do we seek to recognize that this land does not belong to us, but we also recognize that Indigenous people are still here, active in our shared communities, advocating for justice, equality, fairness for all peoples and our earth. California is home to more Indigenous people than any other state. There are currently 109 federally recognized tribes and 78 that are still in the position of petitioning the government to be recognized. And this art that many of you might be familiar with is by the artist Jackie Fawn, who illustrated the vast beauty and rich cultures of native California, from the ancient redwood giants to the concrete towers of the city. California, as the rest of the country, will always be native land, and it is important to honor and recognize the land and the people of the land that we stand on. So this illustration is of a woman standing strong with the medicines of our ancestors, prayed with a two-spirit youth holding the drum and songs of our ancestors, and wearing red for our MMIP, murdered and missing Indigenous peoples, and of an elder that has carried the knowledge of our ancestors for us to carry into future generations. So thank you all for taking that moment with us. And next slide, please. So some quick introductions. I'm happy to see that many of you have been introducing yourselves in the chat. So my name is Cynthia Valencia. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I'm a senior policy advocate and organizer with the ACLU. I'm based in Southern California, specifically in the Orange County region. And I'll have Luis introduce himself.
Hey everyone, Luis Ojeda, pronouns he, him, él, and I'm the regional organizing and program manager with our NorCal affiliate, and I'm based in Fresno. Very happy to be here.
Thanks, Luis. So next we have a poll. I know this is our 201, so many of you have already been part, or I hope you were able to join us for the first one, or at least been able to watch the recording of our first session. And just kind of wanted to do a quick poll based off of what we've been having. So you should see it pop up on your screen. And have you attended a redistricting hearing or meeting over the past month? So there's been some California state ones that have been going on for state redistricting, but also local counties and some cities have been holding them already. Some haven't, and that's fine. There's still time, but just wanted to see where people are with these. So once we get a little bit more answers, we will share it with everyone. Alrighty, I think we have a good amount of participants if we want to share. Is it being shared with people?
Yeah, there's 63% who have filled it out. If anybody hasn't filled it out, I just want to strongly encourage you to help us get that number up. We're at 66. No judgment here, so we just really want to hear where everyone is at on this. Great, we're at 75. So I'll go ahead and share that now.
Alrighty, so it looks like most people have not, but plan to, which is great, which is why we're having this meeting, so that hopefully you feel prepared and comfortable participating in your meetings. And really happy to see that some of you have already participated in either the state meetings, like the statewide, the California Citizens Redistricting Commission meetings, or with your local county or city. Yeah, so thanks everyone for participating in that poll. And we will continue talking about this. It's not just, these 2 sessions that we're going to have, or Luis and I will talk more about later, but right now we want to give you a quick update on what's been happening since our last training. So Luis, do you want to give that update?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And let me close these results. So I do just want to also take a moment to note that this is a smaller group than last time. And so really want to encourage you all to participate, whether that's in the chat with any question you might have, or by raising your hand. And you can also come off mute and you can be part of the conversation. So really want to make sure that you all feel as comfortable interacting during the presentation as possible. This whole purpose of the training, right, is really to make sure that you all feel prepared to participate in the redistricting process. And so we really tried to make this as interactive as possible, and also hopefully as easy to understand and follow as well. So I'm going to go over a few updates from our last training. So we last came together back at the end of June. One thing that is new since then, since last week, the Census Bureau recently announced that the redistricting data, they're going to be releasing it this Thursday. So that's exciting. We have obviously had a lot of delays with this data coming out, but now there's a more firm date of Thursday. So we really just want to acknowledge that. But also remind folks that the state will still need about a month to reformat the data and reallocate those who are in state detention to their last known address. So hopefully by mid to late September, all that data will be finalized, and we'll have the set of data that we're going to be working with when it comes to drawing the new maps for the various districts that are redistricting. So again, it just feels like the date was, pushed back and it was delayed, but now it's coming, and we're running out of time. So we really want to make sure everyone is aware of all these deadlines because it's really important for us to be engaged and involved. And then another update as well, the California Citizens Redistricting Commission is planning on asking the California Supreme Court to push the commission's redistricting deadline back about a month to January 14th, 2022. So again, given the long delay in getting all the data from the census, they're asking for a little bit more time. Also, they're taking into consideration the fact that a December 15th deadline means that a lot of the last hearings and meetings would happen during the holiday season. And so thinking about how to sort of avoid that so that there's a little bit more time for folks to kind of pay attention during that period. So want to flag that it's obviously not a for sure thing. The Supreme Court could come back and say, no, the original deadline is going to stick. But it could be that it gets extended a little bit more and there's a little bit more time for folks to engage and prepare. But yeah, this is really coming up soon. So just want to kind of stress that as well. And then lastly, just want to mention that many local redistricting efforts across the state are also underway, holding community meetings and local commissions, or having local commission meetings and having them begin their process. And as we shared, or as you all shared in the poll as well, some of you all have been attending some of these meetings. So that's really great to see as well. And just to quickly note as well, most school districts haven't started their process quite yet. So definitely be on the lookout for that. So that is just a few quick updates that we wanted to share. And now I'm going to share the agenda for today. So here's the things that we're going to be discussing. So first, we're going to talk about communities of interest testimony. Oftentimes, this is shortened to be COI testimony, and so you might hear that as well in your as you're doing this work. Then we'll talk about empowering historically disenfranchised communities, offer a few case studies, and then end by going over some mapping tools that are available to you It won't be exhaustive. There's obviously lots of different tools that are available, but we wanted to kind of preview that a little bit and give you an overview of what those look like. Great. So we're going to go ahead and start again with the communities of interest testimony for the first section. So a few things to note. A jurisdiction's communities of interest are its overlapping sets of neighborhoods, networks, and groups that share interests, priority views, cultures, histories, languages, and values. So we shared this definition with you all during our last session, and it really just means that this is a group of people who have shared interests or have similar beliefs, or maybe they vote the same way, or maybe their community looks similarly, right? So an example could be, for example, a set of rural communities who maybe are represented by the same or similar governments, or maybe they look similar in terms of the people who live there, right? Or maybe a lot of them have agricultural jobs, for example. And so communities of interest is really kind of a key component of the redistricting process. And it's important to note that we all belong to different communities, right? So as we're talking about putting together maps for redistricting, it's really important for everyone to reflect on what community you're a part of. Because as they're drawing maps, they're combining different communities into one. And so that's something that obviously is going to impact you. If you're being combined with other people who maybe don't have a similar set of interests or languages, for example, or values as you, that's going to have an impact in terms of who you're able to elect and who you're able to have represent you. So this is a super important process that really does require as much input as possible. So one of the first steps that a lot of the different commissions and that are in the community hearings as well, and the community meetings that jurisdictions are holding is seeking input on communities of interest. So we want to stress the importance of that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, offer an example, and then also offer a tool that you can also use to reflect on that and kind of put together your own statement for what that could look like. So we're going to show you an example of a public testimony that someone recently gave at a California Citizens Redistricting Commission COI hearing. So I want everyone to just listen closely, and hopefully we don't have any tech issues, but hopefully everyone can listen closely to what's being discussed and shared. And then we'll do a little bit of a discussion together about, what did the person who was giving the testimony do well, and are there any areas that could be improved as well. So we're going to play it, and hopefully this works.
My name is Lucas Zucker. I'm a resident of Ventura, California. I really wanted to speak about the importance of keeping Western Ventura County together as a community of interest. That's, communities of Ventura, Ojai, Oxnard, Port Hueneme, Santa Paula, Fillmore. This is really an important community of interest because there's really a big divide between Western Ventura County and Eastern Ventura County. Western Ventura County is majority Latino, agricultural, more working class, faces more disparities in housing and education and healthcare compared to Eastern Ventura County, it was more affluent, less racially diverse, less immigrant, and less Spanish speakers. And Western Ventura County also is really an environmental justice community, as designated by the state's Cal Enviro screen. We face a lot of issues from pollution from oil and gas development to agricultural chemicals like pesticides and fertilizers to groundwater depletion. And particularly in my neighborhood on the west side of Ventura, we're really impacted by the oil fields here. And so our Senate districts currently really respect that, keeping kind of Western Ventura County together, as well as Santa Barbara County, which we share a lot in common with, and sometimes even more in common than Eastern Ventura County. But I think the assembly districts currently don't really do a very good job of that, of recognizing the divide between Western and Eastern Ventura County. And I think particularly Oxnard doesn't make sense to be in the Eastern Ventura County district that it currently is. My name is Lucas Zucker.
Great. So wanted to kind of open up the room. What did you all hear in terms of the testimony that was shared? What do you think was effective in terms of what the person was saying? And I see Chris, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I thought the speech was, the testimony was effective. Obviously, he thought it out in advance, which I think is very important. Maybe he had it written out and read it to the committee. I think that 3 minutes is a very short time, but you can pack in a lot of information if you're prepared. I have a question. I'm wondering if these meetings are accessible. How did you get this recording? And is there a place that we can go to listen to the previous meetings?
Great question. We'll go over that in the next slide, so I'll definitely answer that question. But definitely just want to highlight the things that you said in terms of it being clear and him highlighting different aspects of his community. So thank you for sharing, Chris. And yeah, 3 minutes definitely isn't that much time, but you're right. When you prepare and you have a written statement, you can really get a lot in those 3 minutes. And I see Kat, your hand is up as well.
Yes, thank you. All in all, I was very impressed by the fact that he did have many facts. It seemed to me it would have been somewhat more effective if he had not kept going back and forth and back and forth. If he had instead said, okay, here are the characteristics of Western Ventura County. And then in contradistinction, Eastern Ventura County has these different characteristics, because the back and forth to me was, I thought, slightly confusing. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Any other feedback? Elizabeth, I think I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, please call me Liz.
Liz, of course.
I tend to go back and forth myself, so that wasn't quite an issue for me, but I recognize it, Kat. I thought what was really good was he had researched and drawn up a very concrete list of the cities that he thought needed to be grouped together, and provided very compelling reasons why they belonged together, why they shared the same challenges, as opposed to the eastern side of the county. It was kind of interesting that he pulled Santa Barbara in at the end. That was kind of maybe a little of that back and forth. If depending on what the scenario was that they were discussing, because if it was all within that one county, maybe he could have left off the Santa Barbara part. And Chris, I love that little girl climbing there in the background.
Thanks for sharing, Liz. Great. Well, thank you all so much for chiming in, and definitely want to uplift a lot of the things that were shared. So talking about the difference between the two regions that that the speaker uplifted about Ventura County, right? Saying one maybe is more affluent, less racially diverse. Another one is more immigrant, more working class. So I think those are the kinds of things that you really want to pull out, right? So we want to share some of the questions, the guiding questions that the statewide commission has on their website that you can also use to help craft your testimony when you're talking about your community of interest. So some of the questions include, tell us about your community. What are your shared interests? What brings you together? What is important to your community? And then that second part, are there nearby areas you want to be in a district with? Or are there nearby areas you don't want to be in a district with? Why or why not, right? So these are really just meant to get folks thinking about it and really hopefully help answer some of these questions. And again, thinking about, are there communities that you do want to be included in with, or are there communities that maybe are a little bit different to yours? So we'll send this out whenever we send the email after. So don't worry too much about capturing everything. You'll have a copy of it digitally. But we did want to share this great toolkit that Common Cause, California Common Cause put together. And it's a template for community members for putting together communities of interest testimony. And it's a great guide, kind of shares a little bit more about what communities of interest are, and then it offers this template script as well. So it's a great little guide where you can plug in different things. So one of the things that it starts out with was talking about yourself and also like how long you've lived there, right? They're going to obviously, or they're going to potentially value someone who maybe has been there 20 years, right? Can really speak to the history of a community and how it's maybe changed or how it's changing. And then again, highlighting that piece about wanting to keep communities together and really being descriptive about who is that community, right? Depending on what jurisdiction you're going to when you're talking about this, it's really important, again, to be really specific. For the statewide district, for example, they're drawing larger districts like congressional districts and state assembly and state senate districts. So you're talking about a much bigger region, right? But when you go down to the county or the city or the school board, you're talking even smaller districts. And so you really want to make sure you're paying attention to, you know, who is the audience that you're speaking to, who's the board that you're speaking to, so that you can really incorporate those pieces. So for a congressional district, it's probably going to be multiple cities, right? Whereas for a city council, it's going to be maybe multiple neighborhoods, right, instead of cities. And so you really want to be able to dig in to each of those different pieces and say, who is it? Who is your community that you belong to? Why? And are there people within your community that maybe are different or have different sets of values? And so similarly here, there's a set of guiding questions that folks can take a look at, like who lives in your community? What kinds of things do they do for a living? What kinds of housing is common, right? One of the things that we often look at is whether neighborhoods have more renters or more homeowners, right? Because that makes a difference. And so you'll see a divide in lots of communities where maybe the more affluent communities, there's a lot of homeowners, whereas in the working class communities, there's more people who rent. And so all of those things make a difference. And yeah, it just really has great little fill in the blanks kind of things for the template. And so again, we'll share this and hopefully folks can put this to use and use it at a future meeting. And obviously we'll also be available to help put your statement together, give you any feedback and help you out with this. So any questions about the guide or kind of giving public testimony around communities of interest? And then if you have a question, if you could just, oh, Liz, I see your hand again.
Yeah. I'm an old white woman. And my concern is not for wealthy white people. And I don't want to come across as trespassing or appropriating, but I see a lot of potentially very bad things happening that don't need to. Is it appropriative to stand up in this way?
Great question. Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember during the redistricting process is that it's really great to do work in collaboration and in coordination with others. And so, you know, I'd love to chat more with you, depending on where you are, right, to figure out, are you in a community where there's already, for example, a coalition, right, of folks who are working on this issue and to address some of the concerns that you're raising, to really make sure whatever it is that you're going to be uplifting, right, matches the concerns that others may have. So that way you don't have to worry about, you know, pushing for or advocating for something that maybe is contrary to what other folks in your community are asking for. So for sure. And so Chris asked this question, right, around how do we get more information? Really encourage folks to visit wedrawthelines.california.org. That is the website for the statewide commission. And here I've provided a long list of different upcoming COI meetings that they are having. And so as we shared at the last meeting, they've broken down their outreach strategy by different zones. And so as you can see here in the slide, you can see that, you can see here on the slide, excuse me, that they are doing different sessions for different counties. And so if you want to just take a look at this at the website, you can see the upcoming meetings, see where or when the upcoming meeting for your county is. And again, practice putting together that testimony, and then attending these meetings and speaking publicly about where your community is and why you want to be kept in a certain place. So there's a lot of meetings that are happening this month. So really want to encourage you all again to put these on your calendar, to participate, and make your voices heard here. And thank you, Emily, for putting that in the chat as well. So feel free to learn more about it, but definitely, again, it's a really great opportunity here. Any questions about this part? Great. So, oh, Chris, is that your hand up?
I wanted to point out, that at some point there begins the second set of meetings here. And for our area, our second meeting begins, I believe, on the 30th of August. And you mentioned earlier that part of the initial testimony is to express which nearby communities or areas that you might want to be associated with. And I think that's going to be the focus of the second set of meetings. So they did ask for that in the first meeting. And then they want to know, well, who is it you want to be associated with? How do you want your map to look for any new district that you think should be created that includes you?
Great, thank you. And yeah, they've been holding these meetings since early this year, if I'm not mistaken. So they've definitely had multiple different sessions. So there's definitely lots of opportunities coming up. And as we shared earlier, this process is going to continue throughout the rest of the year as well. So there's definitely going to be lots of opportunities for folks to practice giving their testimony at multiple occasions. Fabulous. So we're going to go to the next section, and I'll turn it over to Cynthia.
Yeah. So last session, we talked about the Voting Rights Act, and I will continue to refer to it as the VRA, just because it's shorter, and just want to reiterate what it stands for. So it stands for the idea that every voter should have a chance to cast a meaningful ballot. And in the Voting Rights Act, there is a part that's called the part that is Section 2, prohibits voting practices or procedures that discriminate on the basis of race, ethnicity, or language, meaning that line drawers cannot intentionally or unintentionally create maps that dilute the voting power of racial, ethnic, or language minorities. And I just wanted to say that, we're going to be using the term, or I will be using the term minority here, because that's what's written in the law. So the law specifically uses the word minority, while we at the ACLU and many of our partners, we recognize that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other communities of color have been referred to minorities, despite the fact that in many cases, we are not actually the numerical minorities. And we also recognize that the term carries an incorrect connotation regarding a lack of either political power, socioeconomic power. But like I said, this is how the law refers to it right now. So until we can change that, that's how we will continue to refer to it. But to go back, so because you cannot create maps that intentionally try to dilute the voting power of racial or ethnic minorities, we have to use race and ethnic data to figure out that we're not doing that, if that makes sense. So the Supreme Court does, while it does not permit racial gerrymandering, where maps where race is the dominant and controlling factor that line drawers consider when they place residents inside or outside of a district, but they can be done with quotes with the consciousness of race. So it's a kind of fine line that we're trying to make, right? Where the map shouldn't, race shouldn't be the dominant factor, but it should be taken into account because it is important in many of these communities. So Lisa and I will go over some very specific examples instead of, kind of talking in the overall theme of it in a bit, but just kind of wanted to establish that first. So let me go over a little bit more about the Voting Rights Act requirements. So Lisa, can we go to the next slide? So as I mentioned, so the Voting Rights Act specifically says that the vote of minority groups cannot be diluted, and that line drawers must create district maps with one or more, and how they refer to it as majority minority districts, meaning, you know, those that they consider minority groups, that those have a majority district, especially depending on the demographics of the region. So we know for sure that in certain regions, you know, one of these like quote unquote minority communities or communities of color in particular, like one specific ethnicity potentially has a majority in a specific region. So if they, you know, if a certain ethnicity is 80% of the population in a region, they should definitely have it would seem unlikely that they would elect, you know, every single elected official would be a white person if that were the case. So it's things like that that we need to make sure don't happen. And it's actually legally required that they create majority minority districts according to the VRA. And these are the stipulations that they use, meaning that the minority group is large enough to constitute a majority of the voting population in a compact district, and meaning you cannot draw these maps that like stretch off of like hundreds of miles just because you're trying to grab populations from all these different places. The minority group is also politically cohesive because obviously, you know, race or ethnicity does not make you a monolith voting in anything, but you know, we can use data based off of past elections and who they have been electing in certain local races as a way to kind of measure that, and also that the minority group has less of a opportunity to participate in the electoral process and elect candidates of choice. So when we see that maybe with current drawings or in how things are functioning now, that their vote has been successfully diluted. So the VRA, it is written in the law that it should not dilute minority group votes. And that's a thing that we at the ACLU and I'm sure all of you are going to be really intentional about making sure that that doesn't happen this cycle, because we have many cases in California where the VRA, we believe is like there is a violation of the VRA, and we're hoping to correct a lot of wrongs in this cycle. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go over the different types of districts that can be created and that we, will be supporting using the VRA. So the first one was where that we talked about the last slide, which was the majority minority district, where a minority group composes a numerical working majority of the district. What other happens though is that with something that we call a crossover district, and this happens when there's groups that are politically cohesive, and there's when a politically cohesive racial, ethnic, or language minority is not large enough to compose a majority, but it has the plurality of a district. So when it's combined with other minorities that might have similar values and vote similarly in elections, that they can create a crossover district where maybe it's like two different ethnicities make up the majority of that district so that they can elect candidates of choice. And that's obvious because California is so diverse. That is a huge thing that happens frequently in our districts here. And then same with minority coalition district, where two or more politically cohesive racial, ethnic, or language minority groups are combined to form a district where they have an effective opportunity to elect candidates of choice. And then last is an influence district, where a politically cohesive racial or language minority is not large enough to compose the majority, but is still substantial enough in size to influence the election outcomes. So essentially, yeah, we're definitely gonna have some maps to help show these points, because I know it's just hearing the terms, but we just wanted to make sure that you have the actual legal definition of what they mean. And obviously we're going to share this slide with you, so if you ever need to reference it again, but we will show you maps that kind of illustrate some of these things. And I will say, once we get a little bit later in the process, as Luis mentioned, the data will be released on Thursday, but it's not, mappers aren't really able to process it yet, but a lot of communities and coalitions that we are working with are pretty ready to start drawing maps. And for them, and us ourselves, we at the ACLU will also be drawing maps, and we'll be able to better show you what we mean by majority minority districts or crossover districts or coalition districts. So yeah, we'll definitely have better visuals soon once we have the data. But so I know this felt like a lot of information, but does anyone have any questions about these two pieces that I just shared? Okay, we will continue on. And so next slide. So another thing that I wanted to flag about how we use data to better create maps that make sense for the regions that we're covering. So is the citizen voting age population, so CVAP. So you might hear that a lot. And that just means the population of the district's residents who are United States citizens and 18 years of age or older. So that is really used to measure whether people who are considered like CVAP population or what candidates of choice they elect. While we know that these representatives in the census, it doesn't matter if you can vote or not, it was to count everyone, but it is helpful to look at the CVAP data to see who certain populations are electing, to make sure that, you know, when it comes to redistricting, maybe the maps are drawn in a way that is not allowing people in this population, in the CVAP population, to elect candidates of choice. So that's what this term means when you see it, because you probably will see it, or maybe you've already heard it if you've participated in some other community sessions. But yeah, so just wanted to go over that. So any questions about this? Will this take, quick question. So will this take into consideration the people who will become voting age during the next 10 years period? So, I mean, sometimes. So what we will do when mappers are doing it, they'll do the people who turn 18 or are likely to become citizens and be able to access voting within this year or maybe even the next election cycle, because obviously the new data will do that, but it's mostly used as a historical tool. So like it's already happened and we're kind of looking at those elections, but they do use those models for people who, like, they do take into account people who become voting age citizens or maybe become citizens through other means. Next slide, please. So this is where we're gonna, hopefully this will help clarify, you know, some of the things that we're talking about and how, and help you visualize a little bit with a couple of case studies. And just to be mindful, we are working in a lot of different jurisdictions, but just for time, we only chose two, one in NorCal and one in SoCal. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I live and work out of our Orange County region, and Orange County drew maps last cycle that it was intentionally partisan, meaning they drew maps specifically so a Republican would win every single district, and they succeeded. Until 2018, every single Board of Supervisors seat in Orange County was held by a Republican. And a Democratic Latino has not held a seat in Orange County, which doesn't make any sense due to the Latino population and the Latino population who elect Democrats in Orange County. So I'm just going to zoom in on one district or one region right here. So on the left-hand side, this map is a map of Orange County, and it also has, it's a heat map of the Latinx community in Orange County. So in all of Orange County, the Latinx population is about 35%. But in Santa Ana and in Anaheim, you can see where it's dark red, it is much higher. So in Santa Ana, the Latinx community is about 80%. And in Anaheim, I think it's about maybe 60%, but in certain regions of Anaheim, it is significantly higher, as you can see in this map. And unfortunately, I didn't have an overlay, but if you look at the map on the right, you'll see that Santa Ana is in District 1, and you'll see that Anaheim is in District 4. So what they intentionally did, because Santa Ana is, like I said, it's an 80% Latinx community, it elects, so its current city council makeup, they are all Latinx, or there are 6 Latinx and 1 Vietnamese, representative, but all of them are Democrats. And Santa Ana, is the most progressive city in Orange County. So what they did in 2011 during the redistricting, they specifically put Garden Grove and Westminster and parts of Fountain Valley, places that tend to have more conservative groups and also more affluent regions, to ensure that the Latinx vote in Santa Ana would be diluted. So even though just in terms of logic, you would be, any district that had Santa Ana would likely skew Democrat and would likely, at least sometime in the last 10 years, have a Latinx representative because of that population. But they effectively diluted that vote by kind of isolating the Latinx population of Santa Ana and adding other regions that would dilute their vote. And also by splitting up, because it's pretty cohesive, this isn't far away, like Santa Ana to the parts of Anaheim that have the Latinx community, it's not like miles and miles away that you would be drawing like a funky map or anything. So they broke up the Latinx communities here, because what they could have done and should have done, and probably are legally required to do, is keep this community together so that they can elect a candidate of choice. So that I hope that helps us to say, so legally by the VRA, a majority minority district for the Latinx community, they are legally required to do that. So in my current advocacy with our coalition partners in Orange County, we are advocating and letting the Board of Supervisors know that they are legally obligated to have a Latinx majority minority district in Orange County, and that Santa Ana and these communities in Anaheim and even in Orange need to be combined in order to comply with the law. So I hope that kind of explains it a little bit, and I'll go over this more with folks who are in Orange County. I don't want to take up too much time because I could talk about this forever. But I think this is a perfect example of how redistricting is intentionally used currently, and has been for the past many decades, to dilute certain communities of color. And the intention is they might just want to do it again. So, we've had some very not great comments by current Board of Supervisors saying, oh, we probably won't change the maps too much, but we have been telling them multiple times, no, the maps were unlawful last time. You cannot do it again, or else you will be violating the Voting Rights Act. So that's something that I hope can help illustrate that. But before we move on to the next case study, I will answer questions. I see that Marilee, you have your hand raised. Marilee, you can ask your question. I think you're unmuted. I can't hear you. Do you mind asking your question again? Okay. Maybe we'll come back and see if we can get you in a bit, but let me check the comments if there's any questions. Okay, are there tools or techniques that will help guide that process? Moving from citywide to the next aisle. Okay, yeah, so for Sylvia, there are some tools. So in Santa Cruz, I don't know of like of community groups maybe that are already doing work there, because for us, what we're doing in this region in particular is we're partnering with many different grassroots orgs and in advocacy orgs in Orange County, and we're working together to create maps that make sense for how our communities feel connected. So like we've been giving testimony saying that the Latinx communities of Santa Ana and in Anaheim have to be connected, and we have people from those regions, giving testimony about why we need to be connected and how that can work. Yeah, so if we don't have any other questions, then Luis, do you want to talk about Visalia?
For sure. And I think another thing I'll note too, Sylvia, to your question is, it'd be really important, right, to hear from the Latinx community there and the students, right? Like, do they feel like they are one community, or are those two separate communities with different needs? So I think, like Cynthia said, we should definitely need to connect there and talk more about what the on the ground advocacy looks like. So I'm going to talk about Visalia City Council. Before I begin, I want to introduce you to the Visalia City Council as of last year. Unfortunately, one of the city council members recently passed away. But what do you notice about this picture? Anybody want to share? Yeah, it's probably pretty obvious, right? Doesn't look very diverse. Yeah, everyone is male and white. But these are the folks who are representing Visalia City Council, and 4 of these currently are. And so similarly to what Cynthia was sharing earlier about Orange County, right? Just by glancing at this, you can definitely think, something is wrong here, right? And so one of the things that is really important is to kind of look at the data and to see maybe nothing is wrong here. But maybe something is. And so as we shared earlier, the CVAP, which is the Citizen Voting Age Population, I have a chart here on the screen, and I'll read it. Apologies, it's probably a little bit difficult to read, but if we look at 2009, you can see here that the population was 29.5% Latino, Latinx, and then 62.8% white. So that was for the whole city. And so when you have 62.8% of the population that's white, and you had 5 city council members, right? That still seems off, right? It's not like it's 90% white or higher. This definitely feels like with 30% of the citizen voting age population in Visalia being Latinx, that they should have at least had one minority majority district. And that was in 2009. But we turn to 2019, and the current numbers as of a couple of years ago, the white population is now 47.7% in the city of Visalia, and the Latinx population is now 42.9%. So the Latinx population has grown tremendously, and this really, again, emphasizes the need for greater advocacy on the ground to make sure that, potentially even 2, at least districts that are Latinx majority. But given the fact that the white population is now under half, there definitely shouldn't be any reason why 5 of your city council members are also white. And so part of the work that needs to happen now is to really look at how we can make sure that we're taking into account the data, right? It's not just about keeping these 5 city council members safe and in their seats, right? It's really about creating opportunities for communities that haven't been represented properly. This chart also has a breakdown of the demographics based on the different districts. And so you can also see pretty big changes. Again, in 2009, the white population, voting age population was 71% for District 1. Now it's only 54%. And then also for District 2, it was 65%, and now it's only 52%. And you can see at each instance as well, the Latinx population increases in each of the districts. And so all this to say, again, when we look behind the numbers and when we incorporate all of this, this needs to be part of our decision making. So we have data from 2019 for most jurisdictions, but obviously as well, when the new census data comes out, these are the kinds of numbers that we want to take a look at and really look more closely to see which communities aren't being represented and which ones maybe are being overrepresented. And then similarly to the map that Cynthia shared as well, this might be a little bit difficult to see for those who aren't familiar with how Visalia looks, but this is a heat map that essentially shows the Latino Latinx citizen voting age population. And so you can see here in this legend, the light blue means that there's a smaller percentage of Latinos there, and the red means that there's more. And so you can see that they're kind of, there's a pretty big region here that's primarily Latinx. And then you have obviously a lot of scattering as well. But similarly to what you saw in with Santana and Anaheim, you see that this big red section was kind of cut up, right? So rather than this red section all being one district, it was put into District 1, District 4, and District 5. And so similarly to what Cynthia shared, right, the voting power of these folks was diluted. And again, that may have resulted in Latinx folks in Visalia not having proper representation. So yeah, we just offered this as like a thing that we all really are going to be doing over the next several months, right? We really want to take a look at like how the current makeup of the different governing bodies looks, and if there are opportunities for us to make some changes, make some suggestions. So all of this data can really be helpful as you're giving testimony to really say, hey, I'm a Latinx voter in Visalia, and my representatives don't look like me. Their values, I do not share them. And we need to do a better job this time around. So just want to offer that as an example. But any questions related to Visalia and all the work that needs to happen there? Perfect. Yeah, and Meryl, you raise a good point there, right? If you only have one vote on this council, when you combine the two blocks of Latin voters, it might not really help you influence the decisions of the board. So definitely a need to really take a look at how we can make a difference here. But as I shared earlier, right, I think the Latinx population is now up to 42. So it feels like you could at least have 2 districts there. So definitely lots of changes that could be made there. And where are these maps available in our own local areas? So we're going to share a few tools that you can utilize that have some of this information, but also I would encourage folks to reach out if you need support in finding more of this, because there's definitely different ways that you can find this information. So I know we're running a little short on time, so we're going to kind of run through this. And again, I want to make sure that folks remember that Cynthia and I are here and available as resources, so definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us individually if you have specific questions regarding your jurisdiction. So we are going to share, we're going to share a couple of tools, maybe one depending on time, but wanted to start with California's drawmycommunity.org website. This is a tool that you can use to help amplify your community of interest testimony. So as I shared before, part of what they're doing right now is really trying to identify where what community you represent, or what community you feel like is similar to you. And so words are obviously super helpful, right? To describe it verbally, that works. But when you pair it with a map, you're able to be really, really specific, right? You can actually say, in this community, in this block, in this census tract, like this is where my community lives. And once you cross, First Street, things are different, right? You can really be really specific. So drawmycommunity.org is the website that the state put together, where you're able to submit that COI testimony, so the community of interest testimony, online. So you can go to those meetings and again say your testimony out loud to them, which I think is great and I recommend you do. But you can also use this online tool where you're able to submit the description. So similarly, as I shared before, it has guiding questions where you can type in here and put whatever you think, whatever your responses are to these different questions. And then additionally, you're also able to draw it. So again, I'm just gonna kind of run through this real quick, and I'm gonna zoom into Fresno, where I am, and kind of show you kind of what you can do with this tool. So this is the city of Fresno that everyone is looking at. And with this tool, you're able to do a couple of things. But again, really the point here is for you to kind of highlight where on the map is your community and where we should be kept together. So if you zoom in, again, the different drawing layer changes and you're able to kind of click different sections to map it. So if I wanted to make sure that maybe this is my, here you can see, well, you probably can't see it, but it's Fresno City College, for example, and I want to say like the the different areas around there. Maybe these are also lots of students where maybe they live here. And so I want to make sure that they all are kept together. And then this is a lot of fun once you start playing around with it, because you can make a lot of edits really quickly. So one thing to know, it's really important to make sure that you're paying attention to the drawing tools. It's a little bit unintuitive because this first hand where it's the moving of the map is what's going to obviously allow you to move the map. But once you choose a different section, whether that's by clicking, which is the second option, or by drawing that rectangle that I did earlier, it doesn't allow you to then move it. It's going to then select that separate region. So you got to go back to the move to be able to do that. But essentially, if I lived near Fresno City College and I thought the communities around Fresno City College were similar, that maybe this was folks who shared the same values, or maybe folks who have voted similar ways, or maybe we all go to the same grocery store, or we all shop at the same place, right? Whatever it is. Again, you're able to then say that these people are similar to me and I want to be kept together. So as the commission is not then drawing their congressional district, for example, which currently divides Fresno in half, they can get this input to say, I want this part of Fresno to remain the same in the same district. And I actually want us to not be included with maybe Old Fig Garden here, because Old Fig Garden is more affluent, or maybe they're less racially diverse. And so again, this really allows you to create that separation and to really be specific. And again, as you zoom in, you can really get down to, again, the census tract. So you can be really specific in terms of like who or what parts of the town you want included and which parts you don't. And if you make an error, you can also just use this erase feature, which allows you to erase as well. And this is something that goes to the state commission. So again, remember, this is for congressional, state assembly, state senate, and state board of equalization. But you can also save and print this map and bring it to, for example, your city council or your board of supervisors and say, again, for the purposes of my local jurisdiction redistricting process, these are the communities that I want kept together. And I am Old Fig. My reps are Republican. Yeah. Didn't mean to dig at Old Fig, but yes, Old Fig is definitely different from South and Central Fresno. And then just real quick, I know we're running out of time here, but we also wanted to share District R, which is also another tool that is not available everywhere. So I do want to note that, but it's a pretty neat tool. So I'm going to go back to Fresno. And again, we'll provide the links in the email that we send you so that you'll be able to take a look at it. But similarly, you get a neat little map here. And here you're actually able to see a little bit more data as well. And so if you look at data layers, there's some demographics, for example, and then you can see, let's see, Hispanic population, for example, and then again, CVAP, which is the thing that we were looking at earlier. So just like that heat map that we showed earlier, this one obviously is different colors, but the darker the black and gray, the higher the Hispanic population rate is in those communities, and then the wider, the less there are. And so here you can kind of see a pattern here, right? South Fresno here has darker spots, and then North Fresno has less. And again, similarly, you can zoom in and you're able to really dig into that a little bit more. And then similarly, it has the tools at the top. Again, the little hand is going to be to move it. And then you have this little painting feature. And again, for this one, you can really dig into it again. So maybe I just want to highlight the communities that are darker. And again, this is highlighting into blue. And maybe I'm just looking for the communities that have a higher Hispanic population in them. And then similarly, right, I'm able to say, this is the community that I want kept together. And you can actually like draw actual districts depending on what you're looking at. So this is for the county of Fresno. And so what you could do is actually draw the 5 districts for Fresno. and then be able to actually have all the districts on your thing and say, this is how I think that we should draw the maps for Fresno and submit them. So again, we'll send the links to this, and I really want to suggest that you all, play around with it. Really, that's the most important thing, and just get familiar with it as more and more of that information comes out. And then the last thing I'm going to note as well. So again, this is an example for Fresno County. They actually have different tools that are available. So we showed you District R, but they also have others as well, including paper maps. And so, some people don't want to work on the website, or maybe it's not as accessible for everybody, right? So you can actually like print these maps and hand them out to community members and say, hey, which of these locations do you live, and which of them are similar to your community? And so I just want to note that, because different jurisdictions are going to have access to different tools, but most jurisdictions are going to come up with different, are going to have available different tools for how you can actually draw different maps as well, especially as the data becomes live. You're actually able to use the census data from last year to really play around with everything. So, become familiar with the different tools and get more comfortable, because they're going to become much more important in the next month or so as well. So I'm going to return back to our slideshow and see if we have any questions as we're wrapping up. And thanks so much for everyone for staying on a little bit late. And that was a District R. So districtr.org. But again, we will make sure to send those links.
Luis, we did get a couple questions. So one of them, I also responded in the chat, that Elizabeth asked if we are able to, or if people are able to speak up about the blatantly illegal mapping from the past. Are they limited to testimony and mapping exercises? Is there a way to publicize or expose the self-interest? And I'll say, yes, you can say that they were not fair. Literally, my testimony at the county meetings last week were about how they were unlawful last time, and that they are legally obligated to correct the wrongs from last time this time. So yes, you can say, I mean, obviously the community, like what your community is, but even something like that. And I think maybe Liz mentioned it earlier about, maybe you aren't part of the Latinx community in your region, but you can support the map that they are supporting, right? You can say like, I live in Fresno, and this is the map that I want to support, even if you might not be impacted by it, or maybe you will be stuck with maybe not great representatives, but you still want to support other regions near you. And I think that's totally great. And then for Luis, Chris asked, is there a specific website that I can go to get past recordings of the redistricting commission meeting where testimony was given that you showed earlier?
Yeah, when we send the link to the Common Cause test template, it has others there as well. And I'm pretty sure you can find the recordings for previous meetings on the website, but we'll make sure to find the specific link and share that with you. And then one more note as well, to remember that there are limits to the testimony, like 2 or 3 minutes, right? From these meetings, for example, but written testimony, you can be a little bit more expensive. So, utilize the different tools, right? There may be like a generic email, for example, that your local jurisdiction is hosting to get public comments. And so, for example, you could type up a huge essay, right, and email them that way. So don't think that you're only limited to speaking during those 3 minutes, right? You should continue to uplift whatever issues or concerns you have in any opportunity that you can.
Yeah, and we will, once, we're a little bit further ahead and we have actual maps that we at the ACLU might be supporting, we will definitely be creating toolkits and share with all of you so that you can submit online testimony supporting, the map that that our community partners and people on the ground are supporting. So, if you need help creating testimony, Luis and I are here to support. Great.
So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up with just a few next steps. So One, as I said earlier, we are going to make sure to follow up this week with an email to everyone who participated. So you'll get access to the slides, the recording, the links, and additional resources as well. For NorCal, we're also going to start hosting weekly, we'll see how this works, but a redistricting volunteer call. It'll essentially just be an open invitation to anybody who wants to come and just chat about redistricting, whether it's to talk about any issues that you've had in your local community, or to hear what others are experiencing and really share ideas and help each other out. So I'll include more information about that in the follow-up email as well. And then also want to flag that we are launching a statewide redistricting landing page. That'll also be a great place to just be able to go to and get all these resources, and we'll continuously update that as well. So you'll be able to get that. And then the last thing, or the second to last, is we want to encourage you. Again, we share that list of upcoming meetings that the statewide district is doing, or the statewide commission, excuse me, is doing. But also, if there are local hearings or community meetings that your county board of supervisors or your city council is doing, we would encourage you to participate and submit public comment. So really quickly, for those who are in NorCal or would just be interested in participating in this, I'm launching a poll here. I heard, or I saw in the chat that Friday at noon is not a good time. So would love your input. Any day of the week. I kind of just put noon and 5:30. I know evenings tend to work better, but wanted to see if you all have any input. If you have interest in participating and you want to participate in the poll and just say, hey, I like Tuesdays at noon or I like Fridays at noon, your input right now is really helpful so that we can figure out the best time to come together. We can also maybe figure out multiple times a week if that works, and if we can align everyone's schedules. But again, if you're interested in participating in these regularly scheduled calls, please input your response into the poll just to help us find a good time to meet. So we'll leave it open a bit longer. Thank you for everyone who's filling that out. And that's, again, going to help us schedule a call that's going to work for the greatest amount of people. And I see Friday at noon is actually one of the least popular times. So maybe we can also revisit that original call. But we'll go ahead and end the poll. So thank you for everyone who's participating. And yeah, it looks like Tuesdays at 5:30, which is the same time as this meeting. So maybe we'll look at that as a potential date as well. And so with that, we are gonna share our emails again. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any individual question or need any support with your redistricting efforts. But really appreciate you all for joining the session, and we hope that it was useful and that you all learned a lot.